Orla, and I'll actually be brief, because while I think today is an incredibly important day, in some ways it is a sort of an abstract day, an important stage in the process of delivering access to abortion for women, an important day that has been really crusaded for over decades since the insertion of the 8th Amendment in the first place. And, you know, there are times, I'm sure, when many people thought that we'd never get here. Now that we are here, I think we need to maybe leave a lot of the input to the experts, because what is today? Well, today is moving the second stage of legislation in a post-repeal the 8th Amendment era. Incredible that we are still able to say that now, and it hasn't really kicked in. But we're in a post-8th Amendment scenario where everything is different. But yes, as it stands, everything has remained the same. And what we have been charged with as legislators is putting together the best, most comprehensive legislation that gives a voice to our citizens who have engaged in this debate over the past, not just year, particularly year, but years in many instances. And that's all we've been asked to do. And, you know, last week I was at a press conference by the Abortion Rights Campaign advertising last Saturday's march. And it was attended by the excellent Dr. Mary Favier, GP, who's at the forefront really, and will be people like her and her colleagues of services delivery. And she made the point that the law is one thing, but implementation is an entirely different matter. And there are jurisdictions where they have perfect laws on paper, but in reality, women find it difficult to access services. In other instances, it's the reverse. And to me, the important job here is ensuring that Irish women, in whatever circumstance, have access to abortion where they need them. The Irish people have spoken, they spoke clearly, and what was put out in front of them was access to abortion up to 12 weeks without any restriction, without any justification as to reason. And our job is to put forward legislation that facilitates that, as far as I'm concerned. Now, other deputies have highlighted maybe some of the shortcomings in the legislation that have tabled before us today. I don't see any merit really in me repeating those points, but what I will say is, on the one hand, we expect organisations like the IFPA, who've soldiered women's reproductive health issues for years on their backs, and not just providing the service, but having to crusade for legislative change. We will expect those organisations now to be at the forefront of service delivery in a post-8th Amendment scenario. So if we're expecting that, and we are, we've got to listen to what they have to say. And they have articulated, and other deputies have used their submissions over the past period. So I'm not going to repeat it, but we have a job to do that. And the bill as it's tabled doesn't do that. It's great that it's there, but it does need to be changed and improved. I mean, the IFPA made the point that people spoke clearly about providing access to abortion. But the legislation doesn't mention the word abortion anywhere. And I don't see anything wrong with, you know, titling access to abortion in the title. I mean, we're facilitating, like in the last, not this stall, but the previous stall, it was Mick actually who tabled the first questions and initiatives around broadening access to abortion in Ireland, and Alison Spillane at that time worked in Mick's office, and now she's gone to the IFPA, and we think that they have been really to the forefront and their views have to be taken on board. To me, the biggest weakness and the thing that we need to address more than anything is the issue of continued criminality. And Minister, you know, and we all sat through the Joint Oireachtas Committee, the Citizens' Assembly and so on. It was very, very clear that restrictive abortion legislation doesn't prevent abortion, it just makes abortions later or more unsafe. And it's very, very clear that criminalisation causes stigma, causes harm, and it's something that people wanted to move away with. And as other deputies have said, Section 5.1 of the bill in front of us does continue to provide very broad provision for criminalising the activity. It's very unusual compared with other healthcare legislation, which is much more specific. in terms of what constitutes an offence, and this does create a grey area for doctors. We cannot divorce this from the fact that our HSE has not been women-friendly in terms of providing proper reproductive care for women in this state. Without full decriminalisation, we're getting into problems here. The chilling effect continues, and doctors are being signalled that this is actually it's the same as the protection of life during pregnancy, with just a little bit broader parameters. If we don't address the issue there, I think we will have very serious problems going forward. And in actual fact, it's not even really human rights compliant unless we remove and move to a situation of total decriminalisation. Other deputies have dealt with the waiting period. In terms of that, the World Health Organization says it's a barrier to access safe abortion, and we did hear from the best, the likes of legislators in the Netherlands and so on, who were very clear. Deciding to have an abortion, like deciding to have a child, is a very serious decision. No woman makes that decision lightly. I have no problem with time being provided for people to make that decision. But people I don't need to tell people that. People already allow themselves as much time as they need to make that decision. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't have that freedom. They may be in a job with an employer who might make it difficult in terms of getting time off. They might need to access the abortion pill over the weekend and so on. So the time period for thinking about it has to be, as it is in the Netherlands, from the first phone call. I don't think anybody would have a problem like that. But when you're moving into periods of later gestational limits, and a doctor then operating under the basis that he or she might be criminalised later on, it's too dangerous unless we tackle that issue. So the section on the waiting period needs to be firmed up. I think as well, in terms of what constitutes a pregnant person, in terms of what constitutes a medical practitioner. Other countries like the UK are moving away from a system where nurses and midwives, and the facility is available much more in the early stages in terms of primary health care and so on. So we can't restrict and, I suppose, outlaw those providers from being enabled to provide the facility later on. So, as I say, I'm not going to repeat points made by others. I don't see any point in that. The issues have been well flagged by people at the coalface, and actually this is only a symbolic day, because the real body of work is going to be done at committee. I think there's an acceptance on this side of the House that the bill needs to be amended. We're very glad it's there. We're very clear what the people have spoken on, but at the moment it needs to be improved in line with the wishes of the Irish people, and that's what we'll be doing at committee and report stage. We welcome this strategic landmark, and that's what it is, and we should be glad to recognise it. It's a long time coming in a country that hasn't treated women appropriately in terms of childbirth and so on. So I welcome the fact that you have brought it here, and look forward to working constructively to make it better fit for purpose when it comes out of committee and report stage.
Deputy Matthew McGrath.